if you are either on that hamster wheel and constantly spinning faster and faster and faster because you feel like you have no choice, or you've completely checked out because you're exhausted and you are lying flat on the floor, face down day after day, you don't have the energy or the time or the inclination to address any of the social issues around racism, around sexism, around the gender pay gap, around the environment, climate change. You're not looking at any of that. You would rather just numb yourself out.
This is the Unquiet Sisterhood podcast, where we have uncensored, unapologetic, and sometimes uncomfortable conversations about shit that matters in the lives of women. I'm your host, Jen Pavich. Hey there, it's Jen. I just wanted to check in and say I'm so glad you're here. Whether you're someone who's been listening for a while or maybe someone who's landed on this podcast for the first time, welcome. And as you may have noticed, I've been on a slightly longer than planned hiatus this summer, but I'm really happy to be back, and I'm super excited to bring you some of the amazing conversations that I've been having with incredible women. We're going to talk to women running businesses and women running for office, and we'll explore topics like health, feminism, personal growth, activism, and lots more. So for now, let's get started with this episode. Onward. Hey there, and welcome to episode 11. Today, I am talking with Felicia Baucom. Felicia is a personal coach, and she has a background of 20 years in corporate America, plus an MA in psychology. She's a Martha Beck coach, and she knows lots and lots and lots about burnout, which is what we're talking about today. So thanks so much for being here, Felicia.
Thank you, Jen. I'm so excited to be here.
I am too. I'm super excited to talk about this. So I would love to start out by kind of hearing a little bit about your personal story and what got you interested in doing the work that you do.
Just a little bit, right? How much time do we have? I try to condense this because there's so many parts and pieces to it. But yes, the 20-year corporate America background that I definitely do have, mostly in the field of information technology, which is a very demanding field. And I found that throughout that 20 years, I kept burning out and hopping from one job to another to another. I had 6 corporate jobs during that time. And
which
initially there was always
in corporate America, like switching up like 3 to 5 years, right? It's maybe unusual versus 20 years ago, but I think
True.
I have a feeling our conversation today might illustrate why we're seeing more and more of that in corporate America.
Yeah, and you're right. 20 years ago, it was a bit unusual, but definitely now I have seen online various places, or even hearing people talk that there's this tendency to move around. Of course, some of it is because of my military brat background. My dad was served 20 some odd years in the military, so we moved every 2 to 4 years. So there was also that desire for change. and that initial rush of, oh, this is new and exciting, and then it's like, oh, now I'm bored. But in corporate, it wasn't just boredom. It was this intense pressure to perform and produce and to, basically exhaust myself for the benefit of some, usually profit, a larger thing that was more meaningful to the corporation than it was for me. And throughout the time I get, maybe 1% raises, thanks for your hard work. Here's 1%, enough to buy a burger somewhere, per week, that kind of thing after taxes or even before taxes. So I kept going from job to job to job. And then finally about 7 years ago, I was at one job where the work just kept mounting up. I was getting no support either at home or at work. And I was just going through this long tunnel. I did not see the light at the end of the tunnel. What also didn't help was that my doctor prescribed high blood pressure medication and anti-anxiety meds to get through this, to help me get through that time.
Wow. Which is also pretty common, right?
Yeah. And for some people, to just take medication to get through something is fine. I had decided, in the confluence of other things, that I did not want to have to take these meds just to get through this job. Fortunately for me, I did have another opportunity. It was a work at home position, so I was able to leave that job. And that job in particular I had for 4 years. I left that job and then I started working at home for this company where I consulted and coached people on weight loss. But I was at home and I could start to feel more human again. I didn't have to deal with traffic and didn't have to deal with, I worked with some fine people, but the workplace was toxic and it affected me. Just I'd get home and not be able to shake off the drama that happened during the day and all of the pressure. Everything was a priority. It not able to sleep either. I'd be woken up in the middle of the night because of technical issues. And so it really had an effect on my quality of life. I had some concerns that it was going to affect my marriage as well. We had just gotten married a few months before I quit. And I just didn't want to go into a new marriage in this state either. So I left that, did the work at home thing for 2 years as a coach, consultant on weight loss, and also did my own weight losing during that time. But then because the company wasn't doing very well, they let me go. And so after 2 years, I was back to, okay, so what now? Do I do the right thing and try to go back to corporate? And I did try. Didn't do very well. Admittedly, I was half-hearted about it. Do I really want to go back to a place that has repeatedly shown me that it is not a good fit?
Right. It's like going back to like an abusive relationship or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I was not at all thrilled about that. So I ultimately decided to start my coaching business. I have my background in psychology. I did some coaching, at least from the wellness perspective. I did some coaching there. So I decided, well, I'm going to take all this experience and the knowledge I had at the time of, starting a coaching business to help other people. And at the time I started off as march to your own drum. It was about living an authentic life, live your best life, that sort of thing. And as a new entrepreneur, I'm told, you need to do this. You need to be on all the Facebook and Instagram, all the social media, and you need to blog every week, and you need to,
there's so
as
many out there telling you to do all of the things all of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And being a perfectionist, being the typical A student, it's like, okay, yeah, I'll do that and that and that and that too. Eventually, long story short, I burned out, even as my own boss. So for the longest time, I'm blaming corporate, and there is a lot of blame to be put there for sure. Mm-hmm. I was also burning out as an entrepreneur. I was also being a mean boss to myself. But I was also seeing how the messaging in entrepreneurial culture, even among coaches, has been, you need to work 15 hours a day and you need to do everything. You need to show up everywhere. It's all about being visible. And that's,
it's like that same mentality that, sort of go, hustle, hustle, hustle.
Yeah, hashtag hustle. And push through, and you have to really want it. That same mentality that was also prevalent in the corporate world, or in the workplace in general. I'm sure it's even prevalent in retail. I haven't spent much time there, but yeah, that same mentality was there. So that was an opportunity for me to take some steps back and decide, okay, what's really in alignment for me here? What makes sense? And letting go of some things, easing off of some other things, saying no to a lot of things. And as I was creating this space for myself, spaciousness is a huge, huge value. 2 years in a row, that's essentially my word of the year. So as I created this space for myself, the topic of burnout came through because that was an underlying thing for me throughout corporate and now as an entrepreneur. So I started diving into that more. And I already had some, articles stacked up online and in person. I have books about the workplace, about burnout, and then starting to experience entrepreneurial burnout. That's how I started to learn about Joe Casey and other people who are speaking about how we can create more sustainable, thriving businesses.
Yeah. And I just want to kind of like define a little bit for people. So we hear this term burnout thrown around in kind of like a couple of different ways, but if you just kind of clarify, like, what is burnout exactly, and how can we tell, like, if we're suffering from burnout, like, how is it different from just being tired or being bored or being like, kind of unsatisfied in our work? Like, what's the difference? What makes it burnout?
Well, yeah, you're right that burnout gets tossed around a lot. People say stuff like, I'm burned out on clean eating, I just want a burger, or I'm burned out on Facebook and all the political arguments. But burnout is much more, it's much deeper than that. It's a place where you're not just having a bad day. It's chronic. It's every day. It's one damn thing after another, after another, after another. And it's prolonged. It's prolonged stress, where a point to where and I use the metaphor a lot of hitting a wall. And you're looking at this wall and you're like, I'm just too damn tired to even go over this wall. I'm just going to sit here at this wall, and maybe I'll just lie down face, down, and just stay here for forever. You're at that place of emotional, mental, physical exhaustion. So it's more than just physical. There's some people who talk about, healing your adrenal glands, that could be part of it, but it's also about your emotions. You're just not able to maintain any sense of connection with yourself or with other people. Everyone and everything is a drain mentally. There's a lot of fogginess. It's hard to think. It's hard to focus. It's hard to get going in the mornings, in the evenings, anytime. You just do not want to get out of bed. Just absolutely exhausted, done. And again, it's a prolonged, this is a period of time. I'm not going to say, well, if you feel this way for more than 2 weeks, you're burned out. Not necessarily that. It could be that, for 2 weeks you're dealing with a great amount of stress, but then it's over. And then things start to, go back to normal. But, it's like it's never going to end. It feels like you are in that tunnel and there is no light. And at some point you're just going to sit there and wait for the light to come to you, if it ever does. So that's how I define it.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a full mind, body, spirit, spiritually even burned out. Mm-hmm. You don't want to connect to your higher power if you have one. You maybe even feel abandoned by it.
And this sounds like a place where I think that a lot of people get to, like you said, from time to time, and then maybe it goes away after a few weeks. But what about, I feel like I've seen a lot of people that also kind of get there and stay there. And I've heard you talk about how our culture creates burnout for people. So, and we can talk about definitely like the corporate burnout versus entrepreneurial burnout, but I expect there's like overlaps to how it's created there. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, we're a very consumerist and how to put it? Well, let me put it a different way. Consumer capitalist culture. We're very much aligned with this idea of producing and consuming. And it's all about producing more and doing it better and faster. And as you're producing, well, you're also consuming because, well, we're very much, and I would say this is probably within the last, 50 years or so, where we've become less about being citizens of our country or the world and more about being consumers, buying things all the time. And in order to buy things, of course, we've got to work to earn the money to buy the things. And then when you're working, whether you're working for someone or yourself, you're constantly producing all the time.
Yep.
And then there's all the pressure from other people to produce all the time. That's where your worth comes from. Your sense of self comes from. Those two get, they're tied together. This is how I earn my worth in the world. This is how I prove that I'm worthy, that I'm enough, that I'm successful. And, in this day and age too, we've got social media feeds that are constantly showing us what success and wealth look like. And you can be there too if you work hard enough. But is there ever enough?
And there's also like a consuming piece to that worthiness too, right? Like and you see this a lot on social media, right? It's like worth determined by sort of what you have or what the vacations that you're taking, the, connections that you have, the sort of things that you're buying, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. The people you're connected to, the influencers, the famous people. There's also the big house with the perfect lawn, and there's the type of clothes you wear. I certainly learned this back in the 80s. Maybe I'm dating myself. When I was in high school, I learned probably 6th, 7th grade, so about 11, 12 years old, how important it was to wear the fashionable clothing that defined who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're still seeing that. Of course, now we're just bombarded with images, because thanks to social media, we're bombarded with images of those very same things, the fancy cars, all of that. But, all the stuff, unless, independently wealthy or whatever, doesn't just show up. You got to work for it. But then when you're working for it, it's never, well, there's never, on the one hand, there's never enough that you can consume, because somebody else has more, or you just somehow want more. The bar keeps raising higher and higher, and there's never enough that you can produce. There's always that sense that you've got to do more.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate in the corporate world where the companies are constantly putting profits over people. They lay people off. You got people doing the work of 2 or 3 people, and then those people are burning out, but then they're just basically told, well, you just need to get more organized or have more discipline. It's your fault if you're not measuring up. It's your fault if you're not doing everything perfectly. It's your fault if you drop the ball somewhere. It's your fault if you didn't know you were supposed to do this thing that you were supposed to do. And my message to people is that it's not your fault.
Yeah. And I think too, when we have companies are based mainly, the vast majority of companies in the US are based on this kind of continuous growth model where everything has to be bigger every single year, which is ultimately unsustainable for the vast majority of businesses. So where does that leave the people that are kind of holding the reins, or the people that are sort of the ones, on the little hamster wheels powering the whole thing?
Yeah, where does it leave?
Capitalism, right?
Well, I have often wondered, even when I was in that space, and I've even wondered that now in the entrepreneurial space, just when I hear people talk about I need to grow and I need to expand, and well, then what are you growing and expanding to? Or do you feel like you just need to do that because that's what you've been told to do? Or
right.
I don't quite understand this constant need for growth and expansion, but where does it leave the people who are stuck on the hamster wheel? Well, they're stuck with having to keep spinning faster and faster and faster if they want to keep their jobs, if they still want to put food on the table and feed their kids and make sure their kids go to college. So they end up doing the exact same thing down the line, probably. Or they check out. It seems like for many people, it's a black and white choice. They can only be in this, contribute to the system as it is, and just keep going and hope that one day, magically, it'll all get better. Or they completely check out.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when we were talking before we started recording, we talked about a little bit about how you're starting to look at burnout as a social justice issue. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, I read a book by tongue-tied here, Naomi Wolf so many years ago, The Beauty Myth, and she had made a comment that if women are constantly, and of course I still kept doing this many years later, but if we're constantly focused on our bodies and our eating and every single morsel we're putting into our mouth, we're not looking at the reasons why we're being told to do this. We're not looking at the other larger issues that need to be dealt with in our lives or in a cultural perspective. The same line of thinking applies with burnout. If you are either on that hamster wheel and constantly spinning faster and faster and faster because you feel like you have no choice, or you've completely checked out because you're exhausted and you are lying flat on the floor, face down day after day, you don't have the energy or the time or the inclination to address any of the social issues around racism, around sexism, around the gender pay gap, around the environment, climate change. You're not looking at any of that. You would rather just numb yourself out and watch all the award shows that keep cropping up. I don't know why there are so many of them. Or I use Netflix often to check out sometimes.
As many of us do.
I will admit to that, because I particularly really love The Crown, and I want that. And of course, talk about well, that's a whole other topic. But anyway, because, the crown, the thing about the crown is that you got, this person who's got staff to help her so she can do these greater things. Many of us don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
We have household responsibilities. We have jobs. We have our own healthcare. We're told that we need to be exercising all the time.
And yet that doesn't keep us from comparing ourselves to, celebrities like Gwyneth Paltrow on Instagram and saying, oh my God, my life should look as perfect as hers does. But I don't have that staff. I don't have that money. I don't have, but it's very easy to do.
Yeah, he's like, I don't have all of that. I have a spouse who does the laundry on Sundays, but not everybody does. Most of the women are still taking on more of their fair share of the housework, and they have jobs, and they're taking care of children. And where and how are they going to find the time to deal with that gender pay gap that's keeping them from taking better care of so that they can hire staff if they wanted to. I don't know, not necessarily have to come to that, but so that they can take better care of themselves or take better care of the people around them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also the aspect of, so if we don't address these issues now, if we don't address climate change, if we don't address racism, if we don't address religious intolerance now, this is going to continue. And as this is continue, we're setting examples for our children. I say I don't have children. I have a nephew, but there are, many people in my cohort who have children. We're setting example for our children that this is how life is going to be, has to be. They go into the world, they're working crazy hours, lots of overtime, and they're not addressing the same issues either.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also hurting themselves in terms of health, in terms of relationships, in terms of finances. One of the things I used to like to do to numb myself out when I was dealing with burnout or when I was dealing with frustration in general with work was shopping.
Mm-hmm.
Lots and lots of shopping that over time can hurt the finances, for example. And we have things like Wine Wednesdays. There's a reason why we have that.
Yeah. When you look at things like alcoholism rates among women and how much they've gone up in the last decade or two, it's really striking. And I hear what you're saying about the example that we're setting for our children, because I think that we're actually a couple of generations in now to modeling burnout and then doing, things in a similar way. And it's almost like it gets ratcheted up every generation or so. Like, there's this quote that I've seen around a lot, and it's actually on my own webpage, and it's by Courtney E. Martin, who wrote Perfect Girls, Starving Daughters. And it's, we're a generation of young women who were told that we could do anything. And instead what we heard was that we had to be everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, so I guess seeing that over generations, one can surmise that the problem is only going to get more intense as we go, unless something happens about it, which I would love to talk about as well. Like, even though burnout is kind of created on this larger social cultural level, I'm guessing that there might be some things that we can do about it on an individual level. And like we were also talking about a little bit before, something more than maybe just like bubble baths and like going to get a pedicure and that kind of thing. Like, how do we actually create, fix our lives so that burnout isn't so much of an issue? Because I'm guessing that you're going to say it's more than just getting an extra hour of sleep every night or whatever.
It is. I do this work, over time anyway, as I'm doing this work. It's less about creating more leisure in your life and putting, cucumbers over your eyes and things like that, which is all fine and good. And I do get manicures and pedicures, occasional massages. I like to take my vacations, things like that. But it's that's an important component. But what's also helpful from an individual perspective is to really parse out what makes sense to you. As a person who wants to contribute to society, wants to raise your kids, raise your family, where do these what are the messages that you've gotten, and where did they come from? Who's telling you that you have to put in 80 hours a week, or you have to, your butt needs to be in the chair at a certain time every day before the manager sees you, and you can't leave until the manager does, or who's telling you that as an entrepreneur you've got to work 15-hour days? Where are these things coming from? Start to be aware of what these messages are, and what makes sense for you going forward. And part of doing that, though, requires you to slow down.
Yeah, it's hard for us to notice where anything is coming from when we're racing through our day, multitasking as fast as we possibly can every waking minute.
Yeah. Because we've been led to believe, and I've certainly done this, is that the more we can cram into our schedules and the more we can multitask and the faster we can work, the more we'll get done. And when we're constantly focused.
We've also been fed the line that the faster we can work and the more we get done, that somehow we're building up this bank of leisure time later that never actually materializes in most cases.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's a lot of guilt around that, actually, with the leisure time. And so I shouldn't be, I do this, I have 30 minutes where I can take a nap, but I start noticing, well, there's dust on the TV stand, and maybe the cat box needs to be cleaned, or, maybe I could go to the store instead because we're almost out of, whatever. And I start having this tape in my head of what I should be doing instead of resting. And then resting no longer feels restful. And so there's a certain amount of guilt when it comes to the leisure time. And there's a certain amount of guilt that drives this need to do more, better, faster, and to try to do it all at once and to do it all quickly. And then, of course, never mind that we have a very fast-paced culture, even on the highways. I notice sometimes I feel like I'm going backwards because I'm doing the speed limit, or maybe 5 above, or 10 or 15, but someone is going faster than me. And I'm like, what's happening here? It's like an optical illusion or something. But because even highways are faster, so everything is moving at lightning speed. But if I see slowing down as a radical act,
absolutely,
yeah, to slow down, and not only physically slowing down the tasks that you're doing, but also slowing down the thoughts that are coming up about these things. Slowing down, if you're presented with an opportunity to, I don't know, to whether do a podcast, a telesummit, to show up at a networking event. Because I said yes to this because I felt like this is like totally aligned, and we've conversed before, and you're just fabulous. So it's so slowing down to figure out whether something is aligned, how you feel about it. And that's the other component of this, is that in all this fast-moving, output-centered world, we are not looking at our feelings.
Yeah, and especially as women, we are conditioned to say yes before we have time to think about it. Someone asks something of you, you just say yes. That's the conditioning, right? Like,
we're supposed to be pleasant and giving and happy, and never ask for anything in return, always ready to give.
Yeah.
That's our role. That's what we've been conditioned to believe. But if we slow down and take the time we need to really think about, why am I saying yes to this thing? Why would I want to say no? And there may be perfectly valid reasons to say no. There may be perfectly valid reasons to say yes.
Or there might just be, even if you don't necessarily have a perfectly valid reason to say no to something, if you don't have a reason to say yes, the default doesn't have to go that way.
Absolutely.
Right? But I think we're kind of just so used to doing that sometimes we say yes to things without even thinking. And those things add up.
I can think of a number of times where I'm like, well, I don't have anything else to do. So like someone invites me to, coffee or tea or game night or something. And I'm like, well, I don't have anything else going on, so I might as well, without thinking about, well, so if I do this thing, then that means that I can't do this other thing. And maybe I already had 5 other things going on that day. So I'm piling on and adding to the overwhelm, adding to the burnout, the sense of burnout, and the exhaustion, and probably crabbiness and crankiness because I don't have enough time to actually breathe or sit down and just be with myself. Because a huge part of dealing with burnout is learning to be with oneself. but you got to slow down to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And, when you mentioned leisure and kind of this idea of, oh, like we're saving up this leisure time for later, I feel like so much of that comes back to the fact that as much as we definitely have a culture of performing leisure, and you can certainly see that on social media, we actually in other ways don't value leisure as much as a lot of other cultures do, and I recognize this is kind of like a worldwide problem, but there is the whole sort of, live to work versus work to live mentality with, definitely the US and a lot of Europe as well, being in that kind of live to work.
Absolutely. We're worker earner culture. And I'm totally flipping that phrase from a book I read by Bridget Schulte about being overwhelmed. That the US is very much an earner culture, and we have to earn everything we get, including leisure time. We have to earn the leisure time. And for many people, many people don't get to the place where they feel like they can earn it. And then when they do earn it, quote unquote, when they do take the time, the one thing I want to get away from when it comes to leisure time and self-care and resting is doing it just so that you can be more productive later.
Yes. Yeah. But, it makes sense that we think about it that way, because that's the way that some of these things have been kind of sold in the corporate world. Give people X amount of vacation time or this much freedom to do this and that, because then they'll be more productive, as if that's the only reason to do leisure activities or take a vacation or, stop working at a decent time every night.
Yeah, I mean, some people will even, they don't even think the idea of vacation time. You got to earn that vacation time. And a lot of people start their jobs where they have to work a whole year before they've earned any vacation time, earned that, the official time off. And then each paycheck they get, a couple hours and so on down the line. And it's all about that earning. But then the idea is you go on vacation and then you come back and you're refreshed and you're ready to dive back in and get that mountain of work accomplished. Because the mountain of work it's like the myth of Sisyphus. You're rolling that rock up the hill and then it rolls down and then you're rolling it up again. That's how I felt at the end of that last job 7 years ago, is that felt like Sisyphus. And, I took vacations then. I took time off. I took my lunch breaks. I snuck off places. I even, I had never admitted this publicly, but there was a job once, I won't say where exactly, but I built a fort so I could escape in the middle of the day and breathe. And not everyone can do that. I probably, it's not one of my top 10 ideas for coping with burnout, because that's not feasibly possible everywhere, but I was able to do that.
What you got to do. Like, I think a lot of us have had a, I don't know, hiding place at work, if you will, where sometimes you just have to get away from it. I remember long ago at a job that I won't mention by name, where I had an extremely difficult boss, where I would literally walk to the ladies' room on the far end of the building, which was probably it was a large building, quarter-mile walk each way, just to have the extra time away from my desk and to lessen the chances that this particular boss was going to end up coming in there with me. Because she was one that, liked to sort of follow and find people. So, but that's a sign. If you're doing that at work, like if you're finding that you need to escape that far and that, hide that much, maybe that's a sign that you're experiencing some burnout.
Yeah, that's that. And, taking extra lunch breaks, or I remember someone telling me that if they leave the office to go on site somewhere, and I used to do that sometimes too, but then I would take this really extra long time to go back to the office.
Yeah. Which can be a healthy thing if you're doing it, like, as part of giving yourself like a little bit of room in your day and that kind of thing. But if that's what's enabling you to survive your job, then that might be kind of a sign.
Yeah, it's a sign that something needs to change, whether it's, you could try finding another job. But there is the underlying thing of, as I was saying earlier, so I left a job and I became an entrepreneur, eventually, and I still burned out. So there's still some internal stuff to look at. But there's also the external aspect of, maybe this is not the place for me, or maybe there's something that I can do to help change. Maybe I can be an agent of change within this culture. Some places are probably far too toxic for that, and it's better to leave. But in the places where you can, maybe there's an opportunity, form some like some sort of, I want to use the term support group, but but basically it is support. Because I think one of the keys about healing from burnout is support.
Yes, absolutely.
It's reaching out for the support. Americans in particular, we have this thing about rugged individualism and how we can handle it and do it all ourselves. I think a lot of people don't address burnout because they feel like, well, I just need to push through. I'll get through this. I don't need the help.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to ask for help, even from a better state, even when you're not burning out, even when you are in a better place, it's hard to ask for help. But
I think it's also hard to advocate for yourself too, because I do think, yes, there are some work situations that are probably so toxic that it's maybe not possible to create more time and space or more things to avoid burnout. But I also think that we're so sort of self-conscious and averse to asking for those things in our jobs that helps create the culture of it not being there. If no one ever speaks up, if no one says anything, then it kind of, prevents the next person from feeling like they can ask as well.
But for most of my working life, people have been very silent about things going on within the workplace. Every place I've been, we might form little groups and it wasn't so much support, but venting sessions. But we do that, but then we go back to our desk and then things remain the same. I'm really happy to see that there are a number of people out there striking. Teachers are striking, the grocery store workers in the Northeast are striking, there's strikes happening in other parts of the world. People are now saying, okay, this is not working, whatever it is, it's not working for us anymore. People are being more vocal about it instead of internalizing all the stuff. And again, going back to, it's my fault. Maybe I just need to, just keep my head down, or maybe I just need to, be more disciplined, or think better thoughts, or drink more green juice, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, or do self-care in this way that it's like you're maintaining a car or something.
Yeah.
Like, I think we have this idea of, take care of yourself and take care of your health and get enough sleep and take your vacations, because it's like, for this, in the same way that you would take your car to get an oil change. Because to not do that is irresponsible, and it's not necessarily for you. It's so you can keep working. It's another thing, and then when self-care becomes another thing that you're kind of like gritting your teeth and rolling your eyes when you see it on your to-do list, something has gone wrong.
Oh yeah, that definitely, that's an excellent point, is I think sometimes people think of, self-care, and they're told that, well, you just need to do more self-care and schedule a massage or whatever. It's another thing to do.
Yeah.
You're already doing a lot of stuff. It's what's exhausting you in the first place, and now there's something else you got to do. And so, that's definitely a sign that there's something that really needs to be addressed. And I wanted to say too, I took my vacations, I took my breaks, I built my fort, but I was still unhappy. I was still burned out. And there was more than unhappiness, though. It's, certainly in the burnout state, I'm not happy, but it was more than unhappiness. There's unhappiness, that's, one thing, and you do whatever you need to address that. But when you're in a place of burnout, it's all rolled up into, so many other things, physically, emotionally, spiritually, again. So it's more than just unhappiness. Having those vacations, if anything, I go on those vacations and feel absolute dread on the last day of vacation. It's like, oh, now I got to go back. I didn't feel refreshed.
Right. Or you spend the whole vacation kind of counting down the hours until you have to go back to work. Like feeling like there's this giant looming clock ticking over your head.
Yeah. It was,
and then it's going to be however long until the next vacation, right?
It's like, when is my next vacation? I mean, I really took my time going back to work after those vacations, and didn't even want anyone to ask me, so how was your vacation? I don't want to talk about it because I'm here now and it's over. So I'm going to cry.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely burnout is a larger cultural issue, but what can people do to start to address it individually in their lives? Are there signs that people might have that are like drop dead, like, no, you need to change something big now? Or are there kind of little things that people can do who are feeling burnout to just try to be able to at least get some more clarity? Like, I know, we talked about slowing down, kind of slowing down what we're doing, thinking about things a bit more. Are there other things that you would suggest too?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate on journaling and taking the time to, I say taking the time a lot, but yeah, it basically would require a bit of time to journal and to really, like the flow of consciousness that comes with journaling can help identify or help you see what's going on in your own brain and help you connect with the feelings that come out with the process of, writing stuff down. And it's also cathartic because there are a lot of things that another thing that contributes to burnout is stuffing of emotions, the stuffing of feelings, because we're not allowed to feel, we're not allowed to express, and certainly not allowed, not supposed to express our emotions. But with journaling, you can do that.
Yeah.
And you can let those emotions out. It's a form of stress relief. And it's a way of saying all the things that you wish you could say to that person who said the thing to you at work that really pissed you off, but you didn't do it because, you didn't want to get in trouble or get called in the HR office or anything like that. So you can do that in your own private, personal journal. Now, that's one way. And another way is, I say reach out for support. I know how hard that is for people because I have a hard time with that myself. Because I was taught, I shouldn't need anything from other people. And even at times when I asked for support, I was told, you need to figure this out yourself. I had literally been told that by men and women. So it wasn't just one particular group of people or gender, but someone who, you can trust, a friend, a professional, someone who can help you, reflect back to you who you really are and what's really going on, and isn't going to tell you, well, have you tried just doing blah, 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 or just tried thinking blah, blah, blah. It doesn't try to give you advice, but tries to help you see that, maybe you're being gaslit in some of these situations, and they can point that out to you, and you're not crazy. Show you where it's not your fault. Show you where you have the power and the courage to, to start to get to move out of this, that you don't have to stay stuck in this place. And again, easier said than done, but I think, I think,
working with someone who has experience with burnout, like there might be more wiggle room than people think, but when you're in it, it can be very hard to see it. Just having that second set of eyes, which is what you do for people, in some ways, right? Like, actually, can you sort of describe a little bit about what it looks like for people to work with you?
Well, well, I've been told that I do have a very, very big picture way of looking at things. And so when I'm working with someone, I want to have an understanding of the big picture, what's going on in their lives, who's in it, where, not only just like what they do or where they work, but also, how they go about their day. And, one of the benefits of being an IT expert in the past and sometimes in the present, because I have to maintain my own website, is that I have a very good eye of zeroing in and spotting an issue. And so when I'm working with someone, I might notice something that, they may have taken for granted, or never noticed at all. And, I'm not the kind of person who's going to say, yeah, gotcha, here's that issue. It's like, gently point that out, and I'm going to, help them, untangle that. So a lot of the work that I do with people is helping them to untangle the beliefs and the feelings that they're having, that they have never been able to explain, or maybe they have, and it didn't work out for one way or another, but they haven't been able to express before, or haven't completely made sense to them. They really help to parse those things out for people. But I've been told I have a way of helping people to do that. I guess when you ask that question, I'm trying to look at it from the perspective of the people I've worked with.
Yeah. And that makes sense what you're saying, because oftentimes, especially when we're in burnout, but I think for even, people that are kind of just living typical day-to-day life that might be on their way to burnout, you sort of get to a point where you're on autopilot, and maybe you're not even noticing like the emotions that you're having or the decisions that you're making, if everything is kind of like coming automatically. So I could see where working with someone like you to sort of sort through that and figure out what's what, and notice the things that are just sort of scenery moving.
Yeah, I do this. I do this a lot with my spouse, Milton. I'll point things out to him that I'm not coaching him necessarily. It's just we do have a lot of political and social discussions, and we don't always see eye to eye. And
for those of us who are coaches, we all know how much our spouses love it when we decide to coach them sort of unbidden.
Yes, it's always better to ask him, may I coach you on this? And I still, though, find myself pointing something out to him. And he's like, oh, well, yeah, I guess you're right. I hadn't thought of that. And he does that for me as well. So it's not just, I'm right and he's not. But it's really helpful to have someone in your life who can help point out those things that you're just going through your life. You don't see it, like you said, autopilot. In fact, one of my original messaging that came with March Gion Drum, my former coaching life, which wasn't that terribly long ago, but was about, you're living your life on autopilot, helping people be more conscious, more intentional, more aware of all the things going on in their heads, all the feelings that they're feeling, connecting both the mind and the body, and to really feel into what's happening and what they want to do going forward. I do have a very focused mind-body approach to my work as well, to help people get out of their heads, just as I am still doing that for myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're all a work in progress, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's what I do, and burnout, there's so much more to it. There's there's different, well, let me put it in a different way. There's a lot of things there about productivity, how to be more productive, and how to, how to be more organized. I may throw in some hacks here and there, but my work isn't about hacks. That's not the focus. I'm not
12 productivity hacks to make them perform better.
No, it's very individualistic. I do really, I from the very beginning of my practice, it has always been, this is not a cookie cutter approach. It's very individualistic. And there may be a productivity tip based on the person's unique situation, but no, I don't do the hacks. The 12 tips to do more, better, faster. I recognize that my people want to contribute to the world, but they want to do it in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah, that sustainability is key, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, that's sustainable, that helps them to keep going. And so, yeah, there's some, productivity tips in there, how to get some way of being better organized, some way of getting more sleep, some way of taking more time out, some way of, meditation is also important too. And it's a holistic picture. We got to bring in the whole of a person and the whole of their lives, and stop making things so simplistic. I know it's hard not to do that on the web, in an article or in a Facebook post, but yeah, individually and working with people and customize it so that for them, they can continue going and make the contributions in the world that they want to make and help make the changes that we so badly need too.
Yes, absolutely. That is so important because we need to get out of the burnout and off of the hamster wheel so that we can look around and figure out what is really the world that we want to build and leave to the next generation.
We'll definitely point out the social issues as well.
Yeah.
You're a woman, this is how things are. You're Black, this is how things are. I'm definitely going to point those things out. I'm not gonna hide behind that or say, well, it's not real, or it's
And it's important for people to hear, because otherwise I think the temptation is to kind of get in this space of blaming yourself. Oh, this is just because I'm a slacker, a fuck up, or whatever. So, because I do that a lot in my work too, like this, bringing in the larger cultural issues that affect people is in some ways really freeing, because they can stop putting so much of that blame on themselves and start recognizing that there's a bigger picture and working, learning how to work within that.
Yeah. So again, it's the bigger picture and helping them to navigate that, not to fit in to that.
Right.
Because I think too, the thing to remember is that we got these standards of success that were built for a certain segment of the population.
Yes. Yep.
So the rest of us who don't fit the white, male, rich, heterosexual model.
Exactly.
Don't need to burn ourselves out, don't need to run ourselves into the ground to try to fit that. And so I'm going to name this stuff with my people.
Yeah, the system was not built for us. It's not our party. It never was. So that means that we don't have to play hostess anymore.
Yeah, we don't have to play victim, but we don't have to play hostess either. We don't have to clean up their mess, their shit. I don't really curse a whole lot, but every so often,
that's okay. I have to say, we do a fair amount of cursing here on the island. So Felicia, thank you so much for coming on and talking about all this today. Like, I feel like this is so important, and I always love kind of following your work and seeing what you're doing and listening to you talk about these things that are so, so important. I'm going to make sure to put all of your links and places where people can follow you in the show notes. And I'm very curious to see where you're going to keep going.
I am too.